So tonight, Kier Starmer scraped through that vote. He did get a majority of 75, but given everything that had happened, he politically is a wounded animal. But you know something? We talk about all of these things in British politics, but we forget the elephant in the room time and time again is immigration. I'm going to tell you about some new research that I've seen as part of my job, which is going to shock you about immigration and indeed about welfare. But before I start, I want to say this to you. In my view, you can either have a health care system or you can have uncontrolled immigration. You can either have a social housing system or you can have uncontrolled immigration. You can either have an NHS or you can have uncontrolled immigration. As long as we have a welfare system and open borders, the system will never work. My view is for us to have a good NHS, for us to have a good welfare system, for us to have a good social housing system, but I believe that that can only take place as long as we shut our borders, and we've got to start prioritising our own people. But time and time again, on my radio show, my television show, I keep getting people phoning in. So we all know what we used to do in the past. We used to sneer at and look down upon people who claimed welfare who didn't need it. So obviously the idea was that we all put this money in together, and if you are absolutely desperate on the bones of your backside, then you will go and claim it rather than your children starving. Well, nowadays, there are so many people claiming just because they can. And when I say because they can, what used to happen in the past was there used to be this moral view, wasn't there? If I don't need it, I won't claim it. Where now people are saying, if I'm entitled to it, I will definitely claim it. I saw Kathy Burke on the TV the other day saying that it was awful that people were mocking benefit claimants. Well, given that she was responsible for the sketch Wayne and Waynetta Slob, I think it does tell you something about the attitude that people used to have. But anyway, when I would do the typical 1980s, 1990s type thing going on about people claiming when they don't need it, the phone lines would light up like a Christmas tree. And these weren't the idiots. They weren't the drunks. They weren't the people. They weren't the usual suspects. What would happen is people would continually phone up and say, I'm entitled to this money and I'm going to claim it. And what is the point they continually made? Well, funnily enough, it's a point that other newspapers and media outlets have now cottoned onto through market research. There used to be an attitude in this country, which is, I'll only claim if I desperately need it. Now, people say, I'm going to claim every single penny I can. And the reason is this. Because if I don't claim it, an Afghan's going to claim it, a Somalian's going to claim it, a Pakistani is going to claim it instead. We're not going to reduce the welfare bill. We're not going to play it fair. We're going to continue to nail the British people to the desk. And frankly, if I'm going to pay punitive taxes to pay for Somalis to come into the country and live in social housing, my grandmother, not that she's alive, but if she were alive, my grandmother might as well claim up to the hilt, even though she doesn't actually need the money. That is the attitude of people today. And in a sense, who can blame them? I'm very, very against social housing. You might think that that makes me a little bit of a hypocrite because I said earlier how much in favour I was. But I'm in favour of it in theory, but not in practice. I'll tell you why. 70% of social housing in London now goes to people who were not born in the United Kingdom. Now that sounds unfair, but it's worse than unfair. What happens is, you think about this. Angela Rayner's talking about this idea of having a 40% social housing contingent. Now let's simplify the mathematics here and say 50%, 50-50. So that means for every house built that goes in the private sector, one has to be built to be given to people for free, right? Or a heavily reduced rate. Now think about what that really means. In order for me to buy a house, I have to buy two. One for me and one for a migrant family. Now, they will tell you that migrant families are not prioritised on the housing list. That is not true. Well, okay, let me explain to you what actually happens. So, You go on a housing waiting list, and there is part of it is the amount of time that you spent on there, but part of it is also the level of need. And the people who are most in need are families who are homeless, who have got no other relatives to go to. And who are they? Almost all of them are new migrants to the United Kingdom. So whilst the system doesn't explicitly say, let's discriminate against British people, in practice, that is the category that is going to be most commonly filled up by people from outside the United Kingdom. And so you think about it. Imagine the game musical chairs used to play at children's parties. This is what is going on with social housing. Right. If this was an issue of people not being able to afford houses, then social housing might be sensible. But the issue is there are more people than houses. So in your game of musical chairs, you have 10 children and 8 chairs. You play the music, the kids run round. When the music stops, 8 children can sit down and 2 end up standing up, and they're out. Imagine the chairs are houses and the children are people looking to buy a house. Well, you can then change the system, can't you? You can go, well, okay, the 2 that lost last time, we're going to prioritise them to sit down next time. We're going to say that 5 seats need to be reserved for people who are black. You can say that one child will be able to sit down 30 seconds before anybody else. You can change the rules in whatever way you want, but there will still be only 8 chairs and 10 kids. And my point is this. What's happening now is you're making it harder for people, because you're now saying to ordinary British families, no, you will not get a social house. What you will have to do is buy one for a Somalian. So now you're buying 2 houses. Instead of having your council house, you now have to buy your own home, and indeed one for somebody else. Sadiq Khan's plan for uncontrolled immigration in London is said that we will need to throw out onto the street 50,000 British people in order to make way for the new population. By the way, I'm starting to call them settlers rather than immigrants, just to see how that winds things up. And so we look at this now today, and where are we at? We have now lost all trust in the system. People now say, I'm going to claim up to the hilt, because you know what? I'd rather stick the money in my children's pocket than stick it in the pocket of an Afghan who can't stand the United Kingdom. And what am I going to say to that? What, am I going to shout sponger at that person? Am I going to be rude to that person? Am I going to say that I would do anything different if I was in that position? Of course I can't say any of those things. So we've got that. Now we've got people coming to the United Kingdom who have no intention of working. The total number of people by percentage that came to the United Kingdom last year saying, I've come here for a job, who are immigrants, 14%. 1-4. Do you know a majority of Somalian men have never worked when they've come to the United Kingdom? 80% of Somalian women are not even trying to get a job. You look at these figures, and when we're talking about the brightest and best coming to the United Kingdom, that is garbage. What's happening is we're bringing the waifs and the strays. Tunisia. Recently, I saw a friend of mine went over there, and Tunisia, people are saying on the streets how marvellous it is that Tunisia has improved, because the people with no talent, the people with no inclination to work, the religious fundamentalists, the extremists have now all been exported to Europe, and the Islamic world is starting to jump for joy. The United Arab Emirates are considering putting migration controls on the United Kingdom because they say that we are a home to Islamic terrorists. This is the United Arab Emirates complaining about Britain. We have completely mucked this up, but it all comes down to immigration. I am willing to pay social security. Let me tell you something. What is the biggest amount of social security that's paid? Parents to their children. Oh, we forget about that. Of course, that's the largest amount of social security paid. I'm happy to pay for my brother. I'm happy to pay for my cousin. I'm happy to pay for my mother, God rest her soul, or my father who's in the next room. But this idea that I have to put you out on the street in order to house somebody from abroad and prioritise them, I find morally wrong. And so we are where we are. You can't reform the welfare system, because if everybody's going to claim to the max, the system will collapse, and it is collapsing. And so I say this, Either we have an NHS and a welfare system and social housing, or we have uncontrolled immigration, but we can't have them both. I would be willing as a compromise to abolish welfare, the NHS and social housing, and leave immigration as it is, because that would be the only other option. But the better option is to control immigration. That is the real solution. And also this idea that many people are having now, where we have to prioritise British people. Why can't I prioritise people for houses in this area? You know, they talk about the workhouse, and the workhouse was awful. But really what happened under Queen Elizabeth I was a requirement for every ward to look after the poor of its ward in whatever way they could. So it became illegal for you to let the poor of your ward starve. It became illegal to let the poor of your ward have no house or no clothing. But the whole system was predicated on it being your community that does it. Nowadays, what happens is you pay your taxes to a faceless corporation in London, and in exchange, they flood your community with jihadis who absolutely hate you. Unbelievably sad. Until next time, goodbye.